Welcome to lesson 12 of our AI Bootcamp for non-technical investors. So today it gets a little bit more intimidating, if you will, but let's just say only slightly so, because I think we can do this together. But basically for this lesson and the 4 lessons thereafter, we are going to be working within Claude Code instead of Claude Cowork. And Claude Code is really where coders live, where Python scripts live, and so forth. So this is definitely somewhat intimidating for myself as a non-technical person. It feels a little bit like when if you're a non-swimmer and starting to move away from the beach and suddenly the water is getting deeper. And how we deal with this, I think, is important. I'm bringing a lot of patience to this so that I can kind of get through that trough, if you will, and come out on the other side. So in lesson 12, the lesson plan basically includes us setting up Claude Code, that is, or a terminal where Python can be written and code executed and so forth. It also, we write a small script to pull something from SEC EDGAR on one ticker. We're going to pull the beginning of the risk factors section just to prove that the code is working. And throughout the lesson, we're going to learn some best practices for how to ensure that we know what's going on, what kind of a script Claude Code is writing. So we're going to ask it to explain everything to us to make sure we understand it and approve it, so that it's not just a black box that can fail later and we have no idea what went wrong and how to fix it. I will say that so far I've worked basically exclusively with Perplexity Computer and Claude Cowork, and having done some pretty elaborate projects, some projects that have grown quite large, I've been growing increasingly frustrated with Claude Cowork because there's just too many failure modes the minute you start doing something scalable, that needs to scale, that's bigger, that's kind of busting a single context window. You run into quite a lot of frustration where individual tasks are not talking to each other. The system seems to be running out of memory and basically coming up with failures that I cannot clearly fix or diagnose. And so the architecting of an elaborate system, and in this case, just as an example, the Monday morning briefing that we're putting out as a slide deck every Monday. So that needs to be as automated as possible, but also as accurate as possible. And in fact, accuracy is paramount. And what I've experienced is, as this slide deck has grown more elaborate, there have just been more and more failures in trying to put this together. So rather than becoming more automated, it's starting to become less automated so we can ensure that everything is correct. And that's obviously not the idea, because AI should be making our lives easier rather than harder. And the original idea for me with Claude Cowork and putting together this Monday morning briefing was, give me a slide deck that I want to look at every Monday morning that's going to be super useful for setting me up for the week, for giving me interesting ideas to look at, and so forth. But it needs to be accurate. And what's happened is, rather than doing one clean run, I now have to do this piecemeal. Basically, a lot of the slides need to have their own dedicated tasks, their own dedicated scheduled tasks, and simply to be able to do this within the context windows and the memory constraints and the API pulling constraints that we are encountering in this process. And so it's been growing more and more frustrating and more time consuming to put this together, literally to where I'm spending most of my Sunday pulling together this slide deck and trying to get it ready for Monday morning so that it's in a usable form, because that's obviously key. If it's not going to be accurate and value added, then this whole project is for naught. So what I'm hoping to get from Claude Code is a step function improvement in managing this process. And I do think that Claude Code, as opposed to Cowork, can do this. And also for you, as you go down the line and start having more complex projects, start wanting AI to take over more of your investment research process, I think you will find that you have to kind of overcome the fear of looking at that terminal and trying to use that instead of Cowork. Cowork can still work for more isolated tasks, for smaller modules and so forth, but I think when you need something that scales, we gotta go with Claude. And in today's lesson, I believe we will be successful simply if we get code set up, because there's a lot of terms here that for us non-technical users are going to be foreign, like Git, GitHub, CLI, etc. I don't even know all these words, but I was successful in setting up Claude Code for myself. It's actually part of the same desktop app as Claude Cowork, and you can just literally click to switch from Cowork to Code. Now, there is a little bit more setting up to do depending on whether your desktop already has things installed like GitHub or Python. So you'll have to just bring a little bit of patience to this, but for this lesson and the following 4 lessons, it's just paramount that we get Claude Code enabled so that we can work with it in the coming lessons. I was successful, was also successful in planning and generating the Python script to access SEC filings. So I think it can be done. If you run into real issues, leave your hurdle, whatever problem you're experiencing, in the comments, and hopefully I or someone else can reply and assist. And let's get Claude Code set up so that in the next 4 lessons we can go deeper and start using code, writing Python code, obviously having Claude do that for us, but we are there to help plan, understand it, improve it, and so forth. And I'm really hoping that this could help me transform the process for the Monday morning briefing and for other larger projects where I've really felt like Claude Cowork has been hitting its limits and doesn't offer the path for scaling these things going forward. So I hope you'll get through today's lesson, and I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson on Tuesday of next week. Have a great weekend.